Okay, that's even worse. We're going to take just about a 10-minute break and bring up Millions of Dead Cops. We're running late. We're also going to show the movie right now. It's going to be on the wall. If you're looking at the stage, it'll be on the left, on the wall. Stage left. Give it a second.
This is where this shit started. On the inside of my first album, there's a photograph of a wall of death taken here in 1987 at the Super Bowl. This is where it started. Ladies and gentlemen, on the floor in the balcony, Craigslist, make some noise! When the music starts, I need you to go that way. Can you do it? Ladies and gentlemen, on the floor and in the balcony on Pete's side, make some noise! When the music starts, I need you to go that way. Can you do it? Craig's side, are you ready? Pete's side, are you ready? Is everybody ready? Now nobody sue us if you get hurt, all right?
Counterattack, the show that tries to expose the alternative point of view. This week's topic, alternative music, with our special guest promoter, Randy Now. And now, here's your host, Tom Schweck.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Counterattack. Our special guest this week is promoter, Mr. Randy Now. Hi, Randy. Thanks for being here.
Tom, how are you tonight?
I'm all right.
Great.
Randy, for the people that don't know, could you explain exactly what a promoter does?
Okay. A promoter is the person who you call the agency in New York or Los Angeles that represents the band that you may want, that you know who's coming over from England or from wherever they're from. And you set up the show. You set up the guarantee. You make your promise of what you could pay the band, and you see to it that everything is fulfilled that's per the contract. You make sure that the band has the right sound, the right riders, the right advertising, and you just hope that you can get enough people to pay the admission, to pay the band, and all the other expenses.
Could you explain, like, the type of music that you book at the shows you do?
Okay, a lot of people like to call the music that I book alternative music, mostly because it's only played on college radio stations. Bands that I book you won't hear on the 50,000 watt stations, the WMMRs, or the WPSTs. It's alternative music. It's also, we do hardcore or reggae or new wave. All aspects of the underground movement is covered with our booking policy.
Why do you feel it's important to book this type of band?
To rid ourselves of dinosaur rock like Led Zeppelin. A lot of people, you can't believe how many people, 17-year-old kids that still think Led Zeppelin rules. And, you know, the first album came out when they were 3 years old. You know, it's kind of like me listening to 50s music and saying, like, you know, yeah, that's the real music.
Do you feel that promoting is a good business to get into?
Not at all. Nope. Not at all. Not one bit. I don't know why I don't know why I do it.
This is a song with no words.
I must be insane.
Nobody can hear the missing. They just look at my mouth and look at my mouth and look at my mouth and say, hey man, I know where you're coming from. Yeah, bullshit!
One thing's interesting about my world is that with a lot of the venues, because I was in the band and we would load in early, I actually never went to the front door. I never went through the lobby if there was one. I just don't know it. I know most venues by the back door. Guy would have no reason to go. Usually when we get there at, say, 1 o'clock in the afternoon, front doors are locked. So my relationship with most clubs I don't have any idea, what their popcorn stand looks like, or if they even have a popcorn stand. What I think about is just like the dressing room and like the stage area. And as I remember, and I could be wrong, I seem to think this was a dressing floor. Was there a second floor of the dressing room? It was a really filthy club.
One night we were playing, and the drummer, we go out to put the drums in the car to leave at like 2 o'clock in the morning, and his car was stolen. That was like devastating to me, but that was not uncommon in that environment. I know plenty of bands that got their equipment stolen out of that parking lot. But that was the environment. That's what it was. And in fact, we were real proactive that night. We all jumped in my other guitar player's car, and we drove around until we found the guy. We actually saw him driving up Calhoun Street in my friend's Galaxy that he had gotten stolen. And he was some kind of a druggie that had like hemorrhoids or piles or something. He had all these diapers in the car. I mean, it was really, he didn't really want that car back.
So at one point, there's probably maybe 400 people in the place, and I would say at least 75 to 100 are involved in this fight, where everyone is basically throwing chairs, and they had these little plastic chairs you would almost see in grade schools. They were like the little plastic chairs, and chairs were flying everywhere. The band is playing for about 45 seconds still while we're all running around grabbing people and throwing them out. Then they just stopped and watched. So it was... The band did. The band did, yeah.
I know who the fuck you are. You're the guy who fucking showed up 8 hours late and didn't fucking call because you were too busy doing coke in New York last night after your fucking show. And you're also the fucking guy who's gonna get the fuck off my stage so that I can get the opening band on, get all your stupid fans in here, and get this fucking show over with.
What was the band, The Exploited, we were talking about? The guy came out, they were maybe band 2 out of 5 one night. Song starts, grabs his mic off the stand, sings the first verse, blah, 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 blah. Guitar interlude, he swings his mic around on the stand and smacks it into the I-beam, pulls it down, it doesn't work. Grabs this mic over here, second verse. Swings the mic into the I-beam, that one doesn't work. There's a third mic over here. He grabs that one, same thing, swings that in the I-beam, that one breaks. I have to run back to the office. Hey, Tut, I need to get some more mics. I need to get under the stage to unlock the thing to get more mics out, because we would set up for 5 bands, and you'd set up 2 guitars, bass, drum, 3 vocals across the front, maybe a drummer vocal, that's it, lock everything else up, because you don't know what's going on backstage with bands coming on and off. Tut, I need to get more mics out. The band just broke. Why? What happened? The band just broke 3 vocal mics.
Every time that we played City Gardens, that was a time when my stage fright, which I carried everywhere we went, was at its most intense. And I don't think there was a single time that we played there that I didn't throw up right before going on stage, just out of sheer nervousness. And the funny thing is that the crowds there were probably more into what we were doing than any place else we ever played. I think maybe it just came down to the people who came to City Gardens were people that you really wanted to please, because they were so willing to take a chance on a band. They just loved the idea that someone was going to go up on that stage and try to give them a good time.
Welcome to the Record Collector and happy Fez Day. I do want to tell you a couple things before we get rolling here. Tomorrow night, Raymond, the Amish comic, will be here in the house. Listen to that applause for Raymond, the Amish comic. He's damn funny, let me tell you. We're not doing anything tomorrow night. He'll be delivering his Good Friday sermon tomorrow night, Raymond the Amish comic. No cameras, please, no cameras for Raymond the Amish comic. Nobody gets that joke.
I had an uncle who's passed now. He said back in like 63, 64, we had the old RCA Victor 45 RPM player. You only played 45s, you stack them. He says I'd have a stack of 45s and I could just like pick by the label. Maybe even younger than 63, were to the age where I wasn't even old enough to read, and I was just picking, you know, this red label meant that it was, you know, whatever, Johnny Cash or Buddy Holly, and I would put them on this record player and play the records. We had a comedy record. It was kind of like a real risque double entendre record, and they were called Cornbread and Biscuits. And my brother and I would reenact this routine. It was called the Great, what was it called? I forget what it was called. I have a copy of it, the Great Bartender or something. But the two guys speaking were Cornbread and Biscuits. And once again, we mimicked this whole route, this, you know, back and forth in a bar of these two guys. And we never realized, and they were talking about sticking needles in their arms and smoking pot. And I also remember, probably in my early teens, sponsoring a bike race. Behind our house was a blacktop in a park, and the blacktop had a couple basketball courts. Of course, it was just a rim, none of the string was ever left there. Everybody stole it all the time. But we would have bicycle races this one summer, and we started just innocently. You know, we have 4 or 5 kids on their Schwinn Stingray bikes at that time. Kids on bikes would just collide into each other and really like wreck their bikes and their spokes and broken arms and broken necks. And I can remember ambulances coming down through our yard, actually picking up kids and taking them away. And you know, if we were to do that now, I'm sure we'd probably get arrested and sued. But I was only about 12 years old. I guess it's probably one of my earliest promotion things, other than having Kool-Aid stands. This is probably around 1988. Of course, a lot of punk bands started stealing the Converse Chuck Taylor logo. And I bet you I was the first, you know, to do that. This is the coolest one here. This is my company, Other Side Productions, 84 to 88. And then on the back of the shirt, I had all the bands listed on here that played in 84 to 88.
How I met Randy was quite by accident. A friend of mine from school told me that there was this guy DJing at this club way out in New Egypt, New Jersey, which is completely rural and not a rock and roll destination by any stretch. Me and like 2 other friends, we went out there probably for 3 months. I think it was Thursday nights that he was doing, and the bar was called the Central House.
And it was just like blue-collar rednecks. The guys from the New Egypt Speedway would come out there and drink their beers and stuff. And we're out there playing like Ian Dory and the Blockheads, Sex and Drugs and Rock and Roll, and Graham Parker, Nick Lowe, Elvis Costello, and maybe even throwing in like a, you know, Dirty Water by the Standells. And they hated us. I had bought these Klipsch speakers by then, these huge monster La Scala speakers. I was probably the greatest sounding DJ, playing to them the shittiest music in the world, but to me it was the greatest music in the world.
He also DJ'd at other places. He would be a guest DJ at Emerald City. He DJ'd for Alice Cooper. And Emerald City was like a beautiful club, beautiful. It was the old Latin casino.
Not only was he playing all this current stuff, but he was also playing a lot of British Invasion, some soul like Shirley Ellis.
He'd be up there flipping through them as fast as possible, just thinking like, you know, I don't know how he thought about it, but he'd be able to pick like the right songs.
All these different records, but it was all making sense. Like it all worked.
There was a kid in Trenton named Tony Needy. He was like a disco
DJ. Of course, he played all the hits and he was popular. And he actually invited me to a dance on his like territory. I went in there and I'm breaking out my, Plastic Bertrand, Stop Plan Pour Moi, or the Stranglers, or, the Dead Kennedys at that time. And I got spit on. I remember being spit on by some kid. You suck.
He said, hey, I got this new gig. It's at this place in Trenton. Do you want to go?
I finally saw an ad for this bar in Trenton, and it was called City Gardens. It was called King Tut's City Gardens. Got the number, called them up. Hey, how you doing? My name's Randy. I was still Randy Ellis, not Randy Now yet at that point. And I said, I'm a new wave DJ. And he said, a new what?
And we went to this place, City Gardens, and I was never to Trenton before, and it was kind of a culture shock.
We had a blast, even though it was on Calhoun Street in Trenton. It was an area I had probably never even been to before.
And that was the very first night of City Gardens.
It was very modest in the beginning. There was, just Randy, a handful of people. The venue, City Gardens, was this enormous commercial space, but they were only using a very small portion of it in the back.
On top was the US 1 Motors neon was still up there, but it was so old and hadn't been used for years, it was just falling off. When the wind blew, pieces of it were falling off and like falling right down where the doors were right below you.
City Gardens had 2 rooms, one, the back bar and the front bar. In the beginning, the front bar was not open. It was just the back bar.
It's like this big empty space here. There was just a big empty space and the club was in the back.
And when I started DJing there on that Sunday, that was probably pretty much when I said, hey, I got a couple friends that are in bands. Let me see if I can bring a couple bands in here that did original music, not the whole cover thing.
Tonight we have 2 bands. We have Plainfield Slim and the Groundhogs. And we have from Germany, their first night performing in America. Right here at the Record Collector, right? Please welcome the Space Rangers from Germany.
I'm Jack, and I'm Gorgeous George Messina from the Shades. We started at City Gardens in 1979. We think we're the first rock band to play there. And Randy brought us over from a little club called Brothers in Mercerville, where we were packing the house twice a week.
Brothers was this suburban, very safe, top 40 disco room. And on the weekends, they would have some national acts and they would have all their A-list bands. And they gave all of us the off nights. They would give us Wednesdays, Thursdays. One of the bands I worked with, the Shades, had a lot of original material and they had bigger plans. They wanted to open for people and they wanted to tour. Randy Ellis, Randy Now, was a drummer in a band called Rock Slide. And he also played there, but he also was DJing.
Like when we got started, there were no clubs. There was nothing. It was the beginning of that sort of whole new wave thing. And then after about a year or so, clubs started opening up.
Yeah, at first we were just playing private parties, trying to play something at the university.
Right.
And then he opened up this room in the city limits, in the city of Trenton on Calhoun Street, this place called King Tut's City Gardens.
And we jumped at it. I think Scott went there first, our bass player, took a look at the room, and it wasn't the room that it ended up being. It was the room on the left. Smaller stage, and I can't even remember if we brought our own sound system in the beginning.
I think we did.
Probably brought our own sound system.
And somewhere in the midst of that, clubs started opening in New Jersey, and City Gardens was one of them. And then we were like, oh man, this is great. This is actually something right in our backyard, and it's big, and it's good, and all that.
Because there was also the issue of that the New Jersey scene was filled with clubs, but they were all cover band clubs.
We had a sound company in Trenton, Joe's Sound and Salami Company. City Gardens approached us to help them with their sound, and we were good at helping people get the most sound out of their dollar and not getting ripped off really by showing people how to buy top-notch pro gear on the used market and stuff. So they had a world-class sound system that they basically picked up at a bargain. So around 82, I went in there. My first show, I think, was Thompson Twins, or the members for USA Hotspots.
Good evening and welcome to USA Hotspots. Tonight we take you to one of the larger clubs we've been to so far, City Garden in Trenton, New Jersey. We found a full house.
Once we started going over to City Gardens, and Randy, you know, he built it up with the DJ thing, and then he started booking his friends over there. It was different. Calhoun Street, for those who don't know, the Calhoun Street, Trenton was an incredibly dangerous place, not unlike CBGB's in the Bowery. It was not some place that you went out of your way to go to.
If you've never been to the club, going there your first time, you get lost.
God, I just remember it being hard to get into Trenton, too. I don't know if it was the way the turnpike was laid out then or anything like that, but we'd get lost a few times just getting into Trenton.
It was probably about an hour from our house once we actually learned how to get there the right way.
It's confusing. It's a hard place to find if you don't know where you're going.
Every gig outside of New York was usually just a van ride into some ghetto somewhere, because hardcore shows, for the most part, were always in shitty neighborhoods or rundown areas, so it was never like, you were never pulling up to some nice, you know, up to a good neighborhood and a nice club with a good PA and nice monitors and friendly fucking, hey, all right.
There was really nothing that showed you what it was except for the little tag of City Gardens up in like the upper corner of the building. Wasn't any big murals or any giant music notes or anything like, hey, check out our cool fancy club. It was just a big, giant, crazy warehouse surrounded by a soccer field and woods.
You know, it was surrounded by like half a chain link fence. There was like, there'd be 2 panels, then there'd be like a break, there'd be a couple more panels, then a break, and a hole, and another panel. I think if you went there and you drank and danced long enough, they just assume you worked there.
The club had the nickname of Shitty Gardens, but to us, it wasn't the club. That was the area around it. I don't know how it really was, but we would drive through and be like, man, this place is shit.
And once you went inside, it had the checkerboard floor and the big bar and these weird little statues hanging from the walls and stuff. And you're like, okay, I'm in a club.
In some ways, it was kind of a unique culture experience, New Jersey compared to New York or the Big Apple and whatnot. It was a big old warehouse, big kind of barn painted black inside, punk and rock and roller proof.
I kind of remember like the stage being covered with like pieces of tape, like just it never got cleaned. There probably was a bathroom in the backstage area, which is, I think, deeply, oh actually I know was deeply appreciated. There's nothing worse than having to go to the bathroom in the general bathroom, especially if you have to take a shit and people are talking to you. And they're like, oh my God, dude, I love your band. You're like, great.
And then if you walked off stage left, along the venue, there was another dressing room up a flight of stairs, way down the venue. That's the one that I was always in.
I'm short, and those couple of the urinals, when you first stepped in, were kind of high up. And it was like, I don't want my junk to touch that urinal. So you kind of had to arc it and stand back, and like, it was just not good for me at all. That bathroom it was disgusting anyway, but it was really bad.
I'd never seen so many Trans Ams.
The shape it was in was like the shape it would survive.
The first time I actually went to the club, I was in high school, and it was only the back room. The front room wasn't open at all. It was there was a band called Bricks Mortar playing there, I think. And then I guess I came back in high school when they had moved the stage to like the front sort of the building. It was like long ways facing across the room, and that was 999.
I brought in 999 from England. What happened was they were supposed to play a club in Passaic called Hitsville, which was doing, 999. They were doing Susie the Banshees, a Squeeze, and probably even Elvis Costello, very early, like 79 or so. And they closed down. So there was 999 sitting looking for a gig somewhere. So I found out who to call. It was an agency called Frontier Booking, FBI, and it was run by Ian Copeland.
That was Randy's big achievement, that he booked this band, and it was packed.
We probably paid $2,000 for 999. We probably paid too much, but we didn't know a thing. We didn't know how much, who was what. They said, we need $2,000. We said, okay. And 999 played to probably 600 people. It was probably a $5 door. It was 18 years old to drink back then. And believe me, that meant that you were 15 and there drinking. You know, it just didn't matter back then.
Probably 500-600 people. And that's when it was like, oh man, we can really do this. We can really actually pull this off.
We always had this feeling, I liken it to the Little Rascals, our gang, putting on the show with he had this vision of what he wanted and how the show should run, and he emceed it and ran it well.
After the success of 999 through Ian Copeland, he gave me Wall of Voodoo, Joan Jett. REM was another one. I remember paying REM $500, and I remember the contract rider was a 6-pack of beer and 4 towels.
To me, City Gardens was the immediate vanguard of what began in the 80s. Things were just getting going. The thing about New York is they had a history already. They had the Velvet Underground, obviously, in the 60s. The Stooges and the MC5 came to New York often and played at Max's Kansas City and some of the other venues, and had done famous things here, like when Iggy Pop tore up his chest at Max's Kansas City, I think in 1973. The New York Dolls, they were extremely popular throughout the mid-70s. So that by the time the CBGB scene began, circa 1974, it wasn't completely out of the blue. All it needed was a regular venue and the right guy running it who could tolerate all kinds of weirdness happening. And once you had Patti Smith and the Talking Heads and the Ramones and Richard Hell and all those people, television, it became like this great dumping ground for people from everywhere to come to New York and become part of that, because that's the scene they were looking for. Or else to come from places like Cleveland and play there, which is how we ended up with the Dead Boys moving to New York. By the time you get to the 80s, now there are scenes pretty much in about 20 cities. This little touring scene that starts up becomes an actual way for independent rock bands to make a very small go of it.
What do you feel was the high point of your career as a promoter?
After this interview with you, Tom, well, there's a lot of things. A lot of bands I really take pride in. I've booked the Thompson Twins, First Show in America, Flock of Seagulls, even stuff like Billy Idol, Dead Kennedys. I'm the only person to have booked them 7 times in the last 6 years, every year, and not get closed down by the police. You know, doing a Dead Kennedys show. A lot of bands, a lot of things. Mostly, I guess, the British bands of Public Images, the Thompson Twins, the Billy Idols, the Duran Durans even. Did them, and nobody wanted them.
People who take the underground and punk and indie rock scenes for granted today sometimes have no idea what it took to build those scenes. When punk started, it was a very visceral reaction against the sheer stupidity of the 70s. You know, we didn't want adult rock, soft rock, Eagles, Hotel California, let alone disco. And punk brought back the spirit of rock and roll in a way that was a really good way to shock people we wanted to make uncomfortable.
The farther the top 40 bands moved in that kind of a dance direction and everything getting thinner and losing any kind of a root of rock and roll, the farther we moved in the other direction.
So this is downtown Cranberry. Used to just be like maybe 3 businesses and an old deli up the street there. But now there's a pizza place, and I don't know, there's a shoe repair. This is actually a little weepy here because I worked here, I guess about 10 years, 9, 10 years.
All those years of bands and DJing in clubs till 2 in the morning, I was a mailman.
It did shock me that Randy was a mailman because I thought, well, where does he have the time? I thought he was at City Gardens all the time. How is he delivering mail and doing this at the same time? And I was shocked that he didn't make enough money to live on doing what he did at City Gardens, that he had to also have a regular day job. And I remember kind of being really sad for him that wasn't that he was doing like the coolest job in the world, and still it wasn't enough to sustain him. He had to have a real job.
So he was like the living embodiment of Bukowski, who needed a day job, but what he really lived for was his art.
It's funny, if I never quit the post office, I could probably be retiring now with, what, 30 years in. I'd probably be, you know, happy in that regard, like, I have a pension, but I never would have been able to have kept doing what I was doing. I did leave, you know, the post office. And actually, I'll tell you the story right here. I was just down the street, and it was a snowy February day, and I just had a successful show with, I seem to think it was a Dead Kennedy show. And it was Monday morning, I was walking in the snow, and it was bitter cold, 5-6 degrees. And it was so cold and working, so tired, because I probably walked about, who knows, 3, 4, 5 miles with mail on my back. And it was so windy, and it was snow. But I was just like, why am I doing this? Why am I getting up at you know, 6 or 6:15 and be here 6:37 in the morning? I was just probably out till 1, 2, 3 in the morning. I just had a successful show. I was making enough money there where I could, you know, live off that money. And I was like, why am I doing this? All my friends are like in the music business, they're home. You know, Jello Biafra and the Dead Kennedys just left town. They went to New York or Philly or DC, wherever. Why am I getting up and doing this? And I just said, that's it. And I thought about it for probably not even more than a few days. And I bet you that Monday, I probably said on Friday or Saturday to my postmaster here, I'm resigning in 2 weeks. I'm going to pursue the club. And funny thing, that's when I had the Motorhead show, and Motorhead canceled.
So we're just hanging out in line, drinking beers, and Randy gets on top of this car hood and with a little portable PA, and I had my tape recorder, and I used to tape shows. Back then, I used to trade tapes all over the world. And I told my friend Brian, I said, well, turn on my recorder, see what he's probably going to announce some upcoming shows.
Okay, please, can you listen for a second?
No slam.
Motorhead has decided not to play. We're sorry.
Holy shit.
We've done everything for him. They've decided not to play. It's going to be a fucking ripoff.
Oh my God, I just quit a career in the post office to do this punk rock music and DJ bullshit. And the first show I do is Motorhead, and they cancel on me. And I can remember saying at the show, but don't worry, next week Suicidal Tendencies is going to be here. And everybody's like, you suck and fuck you. And I'm like, oh man, in my head I'm just like, what did I do? I just lost a career, my benefits, a retirement. And it was pretty scary to do that.
The mailman, like the other job, his 9 to 5, wasn't ever who I thought of him as, you know.
The mailman, but then he was still booking all these shows. And, you know, I'm a nice guy. Like, doing business with me is generally pretty pleasant. I can't imagine what he was up against with some of these people, because there are a lot of fuckers on the road, man. There are a lot of people who are not cool at all. A lot of band management people are just not nice at all.
It's funny, like we have a nickname for Randy. We used to call him Goofy Great, because he had this like big old smile on his face while the owner was always yelling at him, and Randy was having to deal with like so many egos. I saw the roster of like just 1 week that you printed Circle Jerks, Black Flag, and all that. I can't even imagine. He was in over his head.
Hey everybody, 91.3 FM, WTSR, Trenton, New Jersey. Randy Now's Capital Garage Radio Program. Oh, yeah,
I moved up to New Hope, Pennsylvania from Yardley, Pennsylvania in, I want to say 1982 or It was about 82, 83. That also coincided with the same period I was really getting into music. I was getting into weird music too. I started with my parents' record collection like most people. I met Scott Lowe, was one of the first guys I met in like 6th grade. And he had like the Nevermind the Bollocks Sex Pistols record, and I had some Devo records, and we were both into the Beatles.
I've known Mickey since elementary school, and we got into a lot of the same music together, a lot of the same kind of underground music of the day. Everything from Adam and the Ants to the Dead Kennedys.
Which wasn't normal for 6th graders and 7th graders. Most kids were into like BMX bikes and stuff like that. And then started listening to the radio.
And now, for more of today's top hits, it's Randy Now.
Music from Toxic Reasons. Once again, are going to be coming to City Garden sometimes in late May, probably on a Wednesday night. Songs called Power Craze from their new LP called Killed by Remote Control, I think. Who cares? Anyway, before that, GD Job and Color Me Impressed. Live music from The Replacements, recorded live at City Gardens. And we heard about 80 or 90 songs from Dirty Rotten Imbecile's first LP. And I'm not even going to name the songs because I didn't have a chance to write them down. I don't even care, you know what I mean?
Randy had a show called The Other Side. The beautiful thing about it was that it was comedy. It was like punk rock and comedy.
I am the Right Reverend Right On Brown here. Yes, that's right. You might know my brother. He's the godfather of soul, James Brown. That's my brother. Super. Everybody say amen. Yeah. Say yeah. Ha!
Randy absolutely believed at this time that Howard Stern totally stole his show.
You know, when I was like 17 years old, my friend and I used to go down when he was on the air, and we would hang out in the lobby and just listen to the show.
Okay, Flippers on the East Coast, you're playing tonight at City Gardens, WTSR party. This is your third time to City Gardens.
Yep.
You like the room or not?
The first time Ted got smashed. The second time the truck got smashed.
We knew that he was affiliated with the club, so we imagined that, you know, he was the ambassador of all this music that we were just discovering and, you know, getting really interested in. So we would just, you know, hang out in the lobby and listen to whatever he was playing.
So we started taping music off their shows, started calling in to like Randy's show, and I think he thought it was really funny that these little 12, 13-year-olds with high squeaky voices were calling in, and he asked where we're from.
Hi, you're on the air. No, you're not. Hi.
Hi, Randy.
Hi, how you doing?
Hi, this is Mickey.
Mickey, how you doing?
I'm fine.
Mickey the Dicky.
That's me.
One day, this little kid who, I don't know, maybe he was like 13, starts showing up, and his name is Mickey the Dicky. He's this kid who is obsessed with punk rock, and he loved my radio show, and he just starts hanging out, ends up on the air with me all the time, and he's spinning records with me, and the reason he's Mickey the Dicky is because he's obsessed with the band, the Dickies. And who could blame him? You know, I remember one day he shows up and he's like, you know, I started a band and here's my first cassette and, you know, we're called Ween.
He'd make a recording of himself playing drums and then bass with all these boom boxes. He would make these really crude recordings, and then he'd play guitar on top of that and record it and have his friend sing.
Those first couple performances were with tape. They had bass and drums on a tape, and then Mick would have a guitar live, and then Aaron would just be singing. He wasn't playing guitar yet.
They put out one cassette after another cassette. I had piles of cassettes, and I wouldn't even listen to it. I was like, this is the most horrible crap garbage. This guy's, and I just was like, this guy's such a weirdo. I liked him, but I thought he was a real weirdo.
I mean, Ween had this ability to fill a room, as an opening act, mind you, of people who absolutely hated them. But, you know, 3 years later, we're buying their record. I mean, they were really brave.
We opened for the Ramones. Randy put us on the bill with Foghat. We played with the Butthole Surfers. We played with Mojo Nixon. We played with 7 Seconds. We played with Fugazi.
I think Randy had a lot of guilty pleasures when it came to music. And there's a lot of music that, like myself being a hardcore kid, you know, there's things I don't want people to know I listen to. And I think Randy had that.
The film Yoko made called Erection that they showed a part of on Mike Douglas' show. No, good guess though, good try. No, it was a building being constructed. It was just a film like they shot it 3 seconds a day for over a course of a year. And you see this building being erected. But once again, they didn't censor him and her when they...
Well, they couldn't because it was really about a building.
Exactly. And remember, John performed Woman is a Nigger of the World. And Mike Douglas.
That was before 1980, right?
Oh my gosh, better. Yeah, so I was saying like 69, 70.
No, it was when he was solo, so it wasn't that.
You know, when you talk and I can look it up.
No, why don't you talk and I'll look it up.
He's the original iPod Shuffle, you know, but he just did it with actual bands, you know.
It's hot there. Damn it. In 1986, I'm forgetting the exact month, maybe April or May of 1986, Black Flag was doing its last ever tour. We didn't know that we were breaking up yet, that was to happen a few months later. But we were on the East Coast, and I think we were circulating around the Hoboken, Jersey area. And we got a call from Randy, and he said, I see on your itinerary you guys have a day off coming up. And we said, yeah. And he said, well, how'd you like to make some money? We said, well, what are you proposing?
I really needed a lot of sound rental. And Black Flag was on the road with this absolutely amazing freaking wall of, power.
So it'll be Overkill, Black Flag, Venom. We'll pay you to play, and we'll pay you for your PA, which is so much better than a day off for us. I mean, we need to pay for that PA, the truck, etc. So we ended up spontaneously going to City Gardens in this middle band slot.
So I had a chance to put together this Venom and Black Flag together. Venom was just, they were so full of themselves. The typical heavy metal thing. The Black Flag and Henry was the vocalist that walked around and talked to you. Hey man, how you doing? Cronus and Venom. They were in a dressing room and I had to have a security guard and I had to have a security guard walk them to the stage.
We played, and I remember asking the audience, is Satan here tonight? Did Satan show up? Anyone? Hands up, Satan? No one is Satan? Okay.
These guys took it so seriously. And it's like they're like trying to actually like be this ultra satanic kind of like entity. At the end of the day, they're these European guys wearing leg warmers and red boots and stuff who just kind of just didn't get it.
But Henry drew, like with a magic marker on his hand, the satanic pentagram, I guess it's called. And he would hold it up to you, he would walk up to you like this, and he'd go like this. I don't know if he did the Spock thing or not like that, but he would go, Hail Satan.
Venom in 1981 releasing Welcome to Hell did something so extreme that no one else had ever even come close to doing. They went as far into the corner with the satanic stuff as possible.
Combining Black Flag with Overkill and Venom, I mean, that's just complete insanity.
Venom gets on stage and, they're doing their thing, and the crowd is completely into it. Jersey metal maniacs are just die hard.
And they screamed and hollered at me. I walked through the crowd and I didn't have a security guard with me. Like, fuck you.
And they sucked. They sucked really, really bad. They couldn't play. They didn't know what to say in between songs. And it was just horrible.
Our sound man, Dave Rat of Rat Sound, put a cassette into the board we had. We had a cassette deck in the board to make recordings.
Dave Rat recorded, every Black Flag show. So he's doing the sound for Venom, so he records the whole show.
And we played the tape later, and it became legendary to us.
See, it's fucking hot in here tonight, eh? Okay. We got told about Christmas time that we had to come to the States to do a promo tour. That meant coming to the States without doing any gigs. So we said, fuck you, man. We gotta get out here and do some gigs. 'Cause you're wild, man. Wild.
The tape was duped and given to other bands. One of them, we made a copy for Thurston Moore of Sonic Youth. He immediately he edited all the raps from the between-song banter of Kronos and made a 7-inch.
They cut out all the actual music and just put out a 7-inch of all the banter. And that's crazy because, to listen to that, I would never think I would get to hear that stuff ever again. To hear it again and just laugh at it. And people to really be like, you were there for that? I'm like, yeah, I was.
from that show, a lot of metalheads were there for Venom were like, holy shit, this Black Flag band is fucking powerful. And I mean, I kept yakking on the microphone, hey, Black Flag's back here in 2 weeks. You know, maybe we started the whole mixing of the metal and punk right there at that show, you know?
Hey, you've reached King Tut's City Gardens. Leave a message for Frank or Randy after the beep.
Listen, my name's Jeff. The Bad Brains are playing there, I see. And listen, you don't have to pay us. I said, I'll pay you to let us play. You know, please get back to me. Yo, Randy called me back in like an hour and a half, 2 hours later, and was like, yo, yeah, you guys want it?
Another Gwar legend, the Walk of Shame. This is the first time I ever heard the phrase Walk of Shame. Now, later it went to become the Walk of Shame is obviously when you're walking home from your boyfriend's apartment or whatever, and you couldn't find one of your shoes. But for us, it was a show we played. We've been playing in City Gardens a lot, and probably too much. And we played a show. The turnout wasn't all that great, and it was a show where we hadn't really rehearsed very well. And for some reason, we just came. I was trying a new mask out that night, and just for some reason, we just came off as really flat, and the performance just didn't have any pizzazz to it.
And it was New Year's Eve.
And it was like New Year's Eve as well, make it even worse. And then, so after the show was over, we had to walk back to the dressing room for that one. It was like, usually we were up above the stage in that weird little cubby hole. But for some reason, it was way at the back of the club this time. So we had to like walk after the show all the way back through the crowd. And I remember people saying stuff to me like, yeah, not very good this time. Didn't do a very good job this time.
We were cleaning up the stage. Ween was supposed to open for us that night, and they were already over us, and they had a party at their house. And people went to their house for free and didn't come to see us. And we were cleaning up the stage. We were cleaning up the stage, and I remember a couple guys at the front row were standing there against the barricade, and they were like thinking there was going to be something else. And they were like, "That's it," and we were like, "Oh, damn."
Randy put on reggae shows. He put on ska shows. He put on funk shows. I mean, anybody that would come in and play. I mean, Living Colour played some of their first shows there. I mean, we're talking about groundbreaking bands that went on to do something outside of punk rock.
We opened up for Henry Rollins there, in 92 or 93, and I guess later someone told us that he had written about us in one of his books.
Randy told us. I think it was 91 or 2 that 92.
And like he wrote up, it's like whatever, like November 8th, 1991, City Gardens. The opening band was so bad that it inspired me to like really rock really, really hard, you know? So like kind of distance in it. But we were kind of dicks though too. Like we were little pricks that day. Snot-nosed kids.
A 1, 2, 3, 4. You guys owe me 10 minutes, all right? A 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm marking time. I'm filling up space on my prison wall. My cells, my mind. I walk around with the whole bag on. I rattle my brain. I rattle my coat. I'm alarmed about. I think I'll go insane. If I'm not ready, come that far.
Randy was like, the dad. He would tell you, hey, that was okay, or that was okay, here's what I would change. Like, he wanted you to get better. So I felt like it was gonna be fun. There're gonna be a lot of people. We're gonna have to bring our A game. And Randy, whatever Randy didn't like, Randy's gonna tell us. But not in a way like you guys suck, but like next time you might want to think about doing this or doing that. City Gardens was my performing arts school.
This is where I lived in, I guess, the mid-late 80s, and we were paying only like $100 a month. And this is where a lot of bands stayed and where I made a lot of friends with bands. Mojo Nixon stayed here. He stayed here quite a few times, and he had these like these little firecrackers he tied to the 2 drawers of my desk drawers. So if I opened one or the other one, they snapped right in my freaking hand. This was here when I was here. George made this refrigerator into, I guess there's a keg probably inside, and that was the tap, and all the bands would, you know, drink. Well, it's not hooked up anymore. There's still a lot of beer in here, though. This is probably a 250-year-old house, 300-year-old house. I remember the Dickies staying overnight. Leonard had some girl with him, and they were up on the 3rd floor. Did you see from the outside? This was the way it was. There's no steps here.
He loved the music so much, he wanted to spread word around. He wanted to help out kids who were making music. He wanted to help out bands that were coming through. And he thought, well, the only way he can do this is if he just takes it on and does it himself.
This is the desk I did all my calls, you know, on and did all my work. This is the desk that booked a million shows.
And to have someone who was so clearly enthusiastic and so clearly compassionate to these kids who otherwise wouldn't have had a chance, people were just, their minds were blown by that.
Hey, it was really cool living here and just, you know, working with all the bands and stuff. And, you know, that's one of those things that nobody really even knows about. The bands used to stay at my house instead of a band going to a hotel for whatever, $40 a night, you know, 2 rooms or 3 rooms. They would stay here. It was all free for the bands. The farmhouse was so big, I could accommodate Guar, 14 people. And, you know, Dag Nasty stayed over and Suicidal. And when I moved to New Hope, Fugazi stayed over a couple nights. But Fugazi, when they came over, I don't know how I got into it. I just started showing like Ernie Kovac's videos, who I don't think they were familiar with. And then we started showing Spike Joe's videos. They'd never heard of this guy before.
I had never heard of Spike Jones. You have a musician, but then you have a guy who just played like shooting a gun in the air, or, you know, they're just like very jacked up and strangely punk in its own way. And I really appreciated him. We just watched, we couldn't believe it. We were watching him, and then he just gave me I have the videotape still. He just gave me a Spike Jones videotape.
He had a fascination with things, everything musical, but he had a fascination with things outside of music too. And he was always so willing to share. Unfortunately for me, one of the things that he shared was the videotape that he had managed to procure from, I guess, a friend who worked at a TV station. He gave me my first experience of watching someone die on TV.
But I remember like the mentors, El Duce was like, oh, fuck, man, I got a video of a guy sticking his head in an elephant asshole. I'll let you have that if you let me have a copy of. But Dwyer was like, what? And I was not a collector. Believe I wasn't a collector. I just happened to have it. Have you ever seen it?
Some of the promoters were clearly clinically insane. And if they didn't start out that way, the stress of trying to put punk shows on would make them that way. Somehow Randy never got quite that far, but he had to have a few screws loose, or he wouldn't be doing this in the first place, especially not year after year after year, and inviting the likes of Dead Kennedys back into his club again and again.
we might have like had like 3 motel rooms in our whole 9-year career or something when we were on tour. We like slept on, you know, floors next to like dirty cat litter boxes. And, you know, when we were in Europe, we stayed in squats that had no heat and hot water, and we're just freezing in the middle of Europe in the middle of winter. And, you know, the warmest thing in there was like a dog that you're wrapped around the dog, like past the dog.
City Gardens really, for me, you know, at that point, defined Trenton. But I don't know the city that well, or at all, really. We'd show up at the club, and then here we are in Trenton, and didn't really have any feeling of need to go out and, you know, see the city or anything like that. Part of it is what you hear. You roll into town, and someone would get some crazy wild hair up their ass to go and have dinner somewhere, and you know, I don't know if it was Randy, but someone would always be like, I don't know about that. You know, we can just give you some food here. You know, we'll give you the food. You don't need to go out and get it. So it gives you this feeling of just stay here.
When you grow up in the suburbs around Trenton, there are a couple stories about Trenton that you hear. One is the story that you hear when you go on the Capitol tour as a 4th grader, and they show you the governor's offices and the big gold dome, and you know that a lot of state workers work in Trenton. That's one story. But then there's this story that you hear from relatives and older people who've lived in the area a long time. And that's a sadder story. And that story goes along the lines of Trenton used to be this great town. Trenton used to be this wonderful place. And now it's not. That you were taking a risk by going there. Now, granted, when you say that to an adolescent, that makes it attractive. You know, that makes it adventurous.
Trenton was one of those towns that was founded by a Philadelphia man. William Trent was a well-known merchant, businessman in Philadelphia who basically came here to summer. He had purchased the land from the original founders of the area. They were Quakers who had come here in the late 1600s. Trenton started to grow as Trent took over. He started laying out streets. He named the place Trent's Town. But as the country began to grow, so did the city. And when the American Revolution takes off, the powder keg, or really the defining moment, occurs right here in the city of Trent. There's 2 battles that are fought here within a week of each other. But the first battle of Trenton is the first victory for American troops at that point. They've been going through defeat after defeat after defeat. And prior to the Battle of Trenton, that summer is when the Declaration of Independence is signed, the book Common Sense comes out. People are starting to rally behind the whole idea, and Washington's troops make their way through New Jersey from upstate New York and other places, and then it's Washington's crossing, the famous crossing of the Delaware River, and then the surprise attack on the Hessian troops here on Christmas of 1776. The city hasn't changed much since William Trent laid out the streets here. It's a convergence of a lot of major arteries that work their way through Pennsylvania, New Jersey, that all converge on Trenton. Most of those streets are U.S. and state highways today that bring you into the city. And along those streets and along those roads started to settle specific groups. Early on, it was religious types. It was Quakers in one neighborhood, Presbyterians in another, the Catholics, the Jews, all settled in certain areas. In fact, one of the Jewish neighborhoods was actually called Jewtown. That's what they referred to it because it was all Jewish. That's where the synagogue was. That's where the kosher meat market was. It wasn't that people were bigoted or prejudiced. It was they just simply surrounded themselves by people they knew and understood. There was a language barrier, even in Trenton. So when you settled in Trenton, you settled in a neighborhood with people from the same area that you came from. Literally anything and everything you could think of had some root in Trenton, whether it was the wire that was holding up the Brooklyn Bridge or the wire that was going into building the Golden Gate Bridge later on, or whether some little porcelain insulator that was going into an electrical motor, or it didn't really matter. Something had something to do with Trenton into pretty much anything and everything that was being made and distributed around the world.
Trenton, New Jersey, the state capital, where government is big business, but far from the only one. Like most cities in this wondrous area, Trenton is proud of its past, but prouder yet of its future.
Most people think of the United States as going on a boom after World War II. And the boom did occur around the country, but World War II sort of is the defining moment in Trenton when we start to see the decline. Decline in the city's population, in the city's industry. People are starting to move out of the city into the suburbs. People are starting to move out of the state into other places. Most of the industry that was in Trenton was sort of mom and pop places. Mr. and Mrs. Scammell owned Scammell Pottery. Mr. and Mrs. Roebling and the brothers and the sons and everybody else ran the Roebling Company. After World War II, we started creating these big corporations that turned into these huge conglomerates. These companies had no investment whatsoever in the city of Trenton. They were worried about the bottom line. And it continued and continued and continued until the late 1960s and 1968 when the riot occurred in Trenton.
Negro leaders publicly deplored this looting and violence. Roy Wilkins, Executive Secretary of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People.
What discourages me and dismays me and disheartens me is that in the reports so far coming in, we have reports of looting, not anger, not violent outbreaks, not an expression of their sorrow and resentment at the killing of Dr. King, but utilizing this as an opportunity to steal things. Now, I think Martin's memory is desecrated by this kind of action.
The riots in Trenton were broken up along racial lines. Now, the powder keg of the 1968 riot is really fueled by the assassination of Martin Luther King.
Dr. Martin Luther King.
King is assassinated a few days later. Riot breaks out in the city of Trenton. One man, Harlan Joseph, is killed. Dozens of police officers, firemen. The city is completely burned. That was the death of the city. State government was taking off, so state government was buying up huge neighborhoods like Jewtown. Bought up the entire neighborhood, demolished it, and wanted to put up urban renewal. State buildings, so you get these huge state complexes being built, surrounded by huge parking lots. But the people move out after that. The people who lived here, the people who grew up here, who immigrated here, who were really invested in the city of Trenton, their confidence was shaken. No longer was this a great place to live. No longer was this a great place to enjoy yourself. This was a place to run from.
None of what I had learned explained Calhoun Street. Because the story I had heard was that, you know, to put it bluntly, black people took over Trenton. You know, that's the narrative. So this narrative of black people took over Trenton, and so we had to move out. That's the story that a lot of white suburban kids around Trenton grow up with. But really, that's not the story. The story is that these other opportunities became available to some people, but not to others. And so there was a large underclass that was trapped in Trenton. For me, going to City Gardens, what it did was it made Trenton a place that I had to pay attention to. This is a real place with real people, and it's part of a real community.
Welcome to the House of Now. Oh, they even said meow, I think. This is supposed to be the dining room. All CDs on the walls. Met John Lennon in 1975 in Philadelphia. But I had a chance to meet him. I was drumming in my band, and we actually did Twist and Shout. This is the basement, but I had a bunch of bobbleheads. A lot of people collect baseball bobbleheads. Actually, there's one here with his head fell off. Here's Have a Jewish Christmas. Of course, Pac-Man Christmas. Everybody needs a Pac-Man Christmas album. Look at this Christmas in Brazil. Santa Claus on the top of that car there. This is a really rare Scatolites album. When I tour managed the Scatolites, Scott Booby, most of the guys were still alive then. They're all dead now, I believe. Christmas with the Colonel Sanders, there's a couple of them. There's a Desmond Decker album from the 60s. Fitness records, burlesque records, how to belly dance for your husband, how to strip for your husband. Easy instructions. Stop smoking on vinyl. Yeah, that's really gonna work. Maternity to Motherhood. Common Sense Guide to Pregnancy and Childbirth. Why did I buy this? What did I pay for it? Did I pay $1? Sitar, these are all records with sitars on them. This is a great section. Cajun Truckers Rockabilly. Sousa and Circus. Kind of went hand in hand, I thought. John Phillips.
A lot of the original punks in general were real characters. They were kind of natural entertainers or weirdos. Creative weirdos, not like the people you try to avoid when you come across them on the street. And so the vibe was always fun. You know, the creative weirdo is the guy who always livens up the dull party, if you go to one. Like the guy with the lampshade on his head.
For young and old, X-Lax, the chocolated laxative. There's a word you don't use too often in the English language. Chocolated? What do you think?
Often very big people, you know, kind of physically imposing and don't care what you think about them. What are you going to do? Punch them? If you don't like what they're doing, you know? Randy was kind of an imposing character.
I take my son to shows now, and he won't go anywhere near the front of the stage. And I'm like, it's weird because I'm pulling him to the front of the stage, and he doesn't want anything to do with it. So yeah, I can understand how people were scared. And actually, I do remember a time when I was scared is the Butthole Surfers show. And it's because he was trying to light us on fire. So that's the only time I was scared.
They were probably the best live band in the world for maybe like 10 or 12 years, at least. We've been listening to the Buttholes a lot, actually, and to us, we imagine them as not even human beings. We thought they were just psychopaths, like 5 or 6 psychopaths that just did acid all the time, and, you know, which really wasn't that far from the truth, actually. And to look at them, they were the weirdest looking band in the whole fucking world. Gibby had that long, stringy hair, and there was just shit stuck in it, like clothespins and dolls hanging out of it, and whatever, trash. And when they came on, it was like being in hell. It was like literally like being in hell. It was like specifically designed to fuck with you.
There was a time when City Gardens couldn't do all-age shows.
During the course of City Gardens' life, the drinking age changed. And when the drinking age changed, the shows changed a lot.
Then it was like 19, then it was 20 to, you know, drink and get in. They wouldn't let all ages in.
Hello, skinhead. Are you hungry? Looking for a City Gardens treat? Well, hold on till I absorb some heat. Some added tang might please you too. I'll slide into a stale bun. And I'm ready for your eating fun.
The Nalbone's got a restaurant license literally by having a hot dog maker machine. That made the building become a restaurant where it could open up to all ages. I knew they had a nude dancer, topless dancer. I knew that. And I said, look, this is an all ages show. Can you do me a favor and not have the nude dancer on stage? He's like, well, yeah, we won't do it. But, you know, there's going to be a screen of, like, you know, these Signal 30 films of, like, car accidents and people's bodies all burned in car wrecks playing in the background. The projector going through her figure. Oh, yeah, okay, we won't do it. First fucking song, her fucking top comes off.
This was the first time that we actually got like a majority of people from our high school to come out. So they came out to see Ween, and that was a good show, and that was a lot of fun. And then the Butthole Surfers comes on, and And all of our high school friends are watching this naked girl go-go dance. You gotta remember, like, these are like preppy high school kids.
When you saw them, you got the sense that anything was possible, that anything could happen, everything was in play. Somebody could get killed, you know, you were gonna see them fuck on stage.
So I had worked with them so many times, I had no problem with them. And then that night, just like all hell broke loose.
Gibby would set his arms on fire with rubbing alcohol, and there was just so much to look at.
The lighter fluid on the cymbal and lighting them, and Gibby striking it with a mallet. You fuck with the buttholes, and they're not going to back down.
Flames were shooting up into the ceiling.
It would go up, it would hit the ceiling, and then it would go horizontal, like creep across. And City Gardens had all the wiring exposed and insulation hanging down. You could see the ends curl up and burn up and sizzle, and like have red coals on it. And I was like, fuck, these guys are gonna like burn this club down to the ground. 1,200 people are gonna die, you know, and it's gonna be amazing, you know. No one's gonna move when it happens.
I think that's what started it all, because you know, we're afraid of fire.
And I think he wasn't expecting it to do that, because the look on his face was like, holy shit.
For some reason, somebody must have thought it was a good idea to incorporate fire into their show. One of the upper curtains caught on fire. Yeah, they were, for some reason, there was like a pyromaniac thing with them.
And he just kept, you know, drumming and playing, and he had a bullhorn, so that was very loud as the PA.
You know, Gibby turned the cymbal upside down and started hitting it, and flames started shooting the air, and Tut was standing next to me, and he went running off like, that's it. You know, none of that.
Frank came to a couple of us and told us to go stop it.
So I took their pitcher of beer and I just poured it on the cymbal. I remember Gibby looking at me, and he took the bottle of alcohol, walked towards me, threw it on my shirt, and just totally doused me. And he lit the lighter, and he was walking towards me, you know, with this psycho look in his eyes. And I was coming back, ready to hit him. And he turned around, and he looked at me, and put his hand out. So I just shook his hand. I wasn't going to hit him then.
Toward the end, when they wanted to close the club, the band wouldn't leave.
We pulled the power, I guess, somewhere. It had to be an hour and a half into the show, though.
Black Flag played there many times. Rollins Band played there many times. And when I would be living around here, we'd go see shows there. So we'd see the Bad Brains, the Pixies, Ween.
They booked everything. Sinead O'Connor.
Was her very first show ever in the United States.
UB40.
Jane's Addiction.
Geez, I've seen the Wailers there a ton of times. That was always great.
Husker Du, Dickies, Ramones, Violent Femmes.
Green Day played there. You know, Nirvana played there. I got to go on YouTube to remember that Nirvana played there.
De La Soul was like the crowning, you know, that was the crown jewel show.
Circle Jerks were always great. Bad Brains were always amazing. One of the loudest bands I've ever worked with.
Like I saw Ministry there when Ministry was new wave. I have pictures, great pictures, Al Jurgensen dressed pretty much like a girl.
I would go see anything at City Gardens for a while because I knew it was going to be completely outside the realm of the hair metal or the crappy dance music that was popular with the kids at my school that I didn't relate to.
Voivod, Faith No More Soundgarden show. And Voivod was actually the headliner.
Gwar shows. Gwar shows. Where on earth did that come from, and how cool is Gwar?
Shit, the Chili Peppers, you know, it's really easy to laugh now about the Chili Peppers and say like, oh, well, that's, you know, but that band was the best. They were like the first to do it, and that was everybody's favorite band. And this is before hits and radio and success and whatever. They were playing places like City Garden, and they played there a lot.
It made all the difference to music in New Jersey. I mean, if it wasn't there, you'd be going Philadelphia, you'd be going to CB's. And it was really important. It was really important.
Hey, get off that court for me, homie. Luke Kohler, come on. Tim Shaw, suck.
now called my mom's house phone, you know, because I was in high school still. And he said, hey, it's Randy. Would you guys like to open up for The Exploited? And I was like, fuck yeah.
That Exploited show for sure goes down in infamy.
The first time that I played at City Gardens, my band's called Vision. We had a show there in early January 1987, and we were booked to open a show that included headliners The Exploited, and supporting them, the Pagan Babies and the Uprise.
The guy that played bass in my band at the time was banned from the club for beating people up. The night of the show, we went there, and I went there with so much anxiety because I knew that I was going to have to talk to Randy and be like, this is my bass player, but he's banned from the club for fighting people.
I know he was bored, I guess. If you got bored, you had to have done something stupid. We just didn't say, hey, kick that guy out because he's a nice guy, you know. And I wasn't kicking him out. That was security guards. They would tell me, then I'd say, you guys stay out.
Randy did not know that he was playing in our band until we showed up at that time.
We walked into the club. They had no idea I was in the band, and we knew something was going to happen. We knew that we were walking into this. It would erupt at some point.
As the words left Dave's mouth, Randy lost his mind.
What the fuck?
What's he doing here? Blah, blah, blah. He's freaking out.
Randy screamed at me. He screamed at me so loud, he was spitting in my face. I don't even think my mother and father ever yelled at me the way that he yelled at me that night.
How could you do this to me? You fucked us. You screwed me. What the fuck were you thinking?
I said, listen, man. I said, I can't help the fact that the guy's in my band, you know? But we want to play the show regardless, you know? He goes, fuck you. He's like, fuck you, you fucked me. Before that, Vision had only played like basements and a couple of little fucking odds and ends shows. This is our biggest break. We're going to play in front of 1,100 people, opening up for The Exploited.
You're gone, out, you can't play.
Absolutely not going to fucking play here. Get the fuck out.
Waddy from The Exploited comes walking over with his manager, and he says, what's the problem? And I said, we're not going to be able to play because my bass player is not allowed in the venue. And he goes, did you come from a far distance? And I go, not as far as you. 40 minutes away, and he goes, that's far enough. And he walked to Randy, and he goes, if Vision doesn't play, The Exploited don't play. The Uprise did the exact same thing. The Pagan Babies did the exact same thing.
Almost everybody in every band around Randy, like one guy and 20 people around him just hassling him. Come on, let us play, let him play, let him play.
Obviously, he had power over me to say, if they don't play, we don't play.
But I think he had to go to talk to Tut, because the man behind the curtain, you know, he was the guy. He was the guy who probably hated me. I don't think Randy really hated me. He just had the duty to keep throwing me out.
So we ended up getting to play the show. We compromised with Randy and said, we'll play, and then Chris will leave.
I don't know what date in like punk rock history, one day I would promote bands and I would have to say from England to make people come see them, you know, and including early Exploited shows. From England, The Exploited, that brought people out. And all of a sudden one day it was like opposite. You put From England, The Exploited, and people were like against the band.
We watched Vision, you know, and then we got up and did our thing. Or I remember being done, and getting our gear off stage. We were all like, yay, we just played, that's so cool. And then we were up in that, you know, perch on the side of the stage.
It turned out that they didn't have a merch guy. So Randy looks to us and says, hey, would you guys be interested in doing merch for Exploited? He's like, you know, I'll kick back a little money for you, you know? And We were like, sure, you know, cool, whatever, yeah.
Chris had to go after we were done playing. He had to leave. I got elected to take him home. The best part about that is, after we get done playing, load everything up into my car, leave, Chris, oh, I forgot a bag.
Then the Exploited play. And they have the record out that has "Fuck the USA" on it.
Back at that time, you know, 87, 88, there was just so many skinheads, so many like white power skinheads back then.
And the place goes ballistic.
Skinheads kind of like took offense to a lot of Exploited stuff, and I don't understand why they paid to get in, but maybe they paid to get in to try to abuse the Exploited, right?
One of the members, and I can't remember, I think it was the bass player, it was a littler guy in the Exploited, they tried to pull him into the crowd, like actually got pulled by his feet off the stage.
Holy shit, are we gonna now be involved in this because we're selling their merch, or Skinhead's gonna come back here and beat the shit out of our little 13, 14-year-old assholes?
To see Waddy right in the faces of the people in the front row with probably dozens of gobs of spit in his mohawk.
Remember, actually, these big, of course, every fucking bad skinhead was like 6 foot, like Frankenstein, 6'10", 300 pounds. I can remember going up there, a little fat dumpy me, 20 years older than them, saying, I don't care if you spit on him, just don't touch him.
Turn around, drive all the way back. He can't go in a club because he's not allowed in the club, so I have to go get his bag. Almost jaw dropped, you know, walking back in just to see treatment that the Exploited was getting. I just couldn't believe it.
That was just brutal. Just so much violence at an Exploited show that it was just, I couldn't believe it. I'm kind of like going, wow, geez, I'm going to stand over to the side. I'm a little kid.
And he's sitting there spitting at the crowd. You know, they're going back and forth. Then somebody got the bright idea. It's like, hey, their van's outside.
And then they like trashed the Exploited's van.
Exploited was bummed.
I never considered hardcore to be a musical sound. I always thought of it as a lifestyle, an attitude.
There weren't a lot of punks back then. I mean, there was maybe 2 or 3 punks in my high school, you know, so having that meeting place, you know, you saw that there was other people, you share your ideas, you learn about other bands, exchange your fanzines, you know, all that kind of good stuff. And it really strengthened the local scene, first of all, gave bands like us a chance to get in front and get our name out to all these areas because there was no internet. That was our social network, City Gardens, you know, that was our Facebook was in, you know, the parking lot.
You know, when you go there and 30 of your friends are there and, you know, people from the outside come in, they don't belong, and, you know, it's like, what are you doing here? You know, it's our club, get out of my pit.
City Gardens had a great hardcore scene there. They would get the New York bands, they would get the DC bands to come up and play. And you could see it almost week by week, if not month by month, the face of the crowd's changing.
1,000 of 1,400 kids going crazy for you. And, you know, it literally looks like they're beating the shit out of each other and climbing over bounces to get on stage and stage dive. And that's a fucking rush, man.
These were times when people just came out to a show and really enjoyed the show. Simple, hardcore. Simple. Boom.
Some people perceived City Gardens as being violent, but I wouldn't say it was violent. It was more like a mutually agreed upon kind of orchestrated dance.
The pit in the suicidal days in '85, you know, it was such an unbelievably fun experience in a physical sense.
It made you believe that you were invincible, or, man, when you go inside that crowd and, like, you didn't even want to go home, you know what I mean? Just stay in the club, sleep on the fucking floor. It was amazing.
From 82 to 86, you know, we saw hardcore sort of, you know, emerge. And what started off as really fun turned absolutely scary. And there were guys, and it was like in the braces and the shaved heads. And all of a sudden, this was not Minor Threat that I loved, straight edge hardcore. This was something else.
I didn't quite realize that there was such like this neo-Nazi thing going on, and for whatever reason, Pennsylvania was like the hub, and Trenton was close enough.
People had these
really fucked up ideas of the way that things should be, and we didn't have that idea. Punks like punks. Period. The hell? I mean, there's different factions of skins. White power skins, the clean-cut American skins, the friggin' Krishna skins, the friggin'... There was a shitload of skins. But only thing that bonded them together, all skins are violent. All skins like skins. Period.
There were people there that would actually fucking murder somebody for you if they were your friend. That's as close as you can come to being related to somebody who you barely even knew. They were just down with you because they liked your band.
I mean, that's actually when I quit, when I just stopped, because I had a real job and, you know, doing this shit Sunday night and stuff like that. It's like, you know, Monday morning, I got to go to work. And there was something going on, some kind of thing going on. I remember being outside and somebody yelled, that guy's got a gun or something. Like, man, I'm not getting shot for $40. You know, this shit isn't worth it. I'm done with this.
Jocks would come out and they'd try to get into the whole, like, you know, the pit and the whole, like, dancing thing, and they thought, hey, this is fun. Or Marines would come out and start wailing on people and stuff, and it was like, that's not what it was about.
We would always stop and break up the fights, or if need be, we would go right in there, get off stage, and break up fights, and we had to do that numerous times at that club.
It was like real shit. These were like real people coming from like cities and like fucked up parts of the suburbs, and then like rich white kids, and they were all converging on this one place. And you know, it was going to get real at one point or the other.
You'd be in the pit, right? And the band didn't even start yet. And we're rocking. We're rocking. Just hit the chord. Just hit the chord. Just touch the guitar. All you gotta do, touch the guitar, touch it. Touch it once, I'm punching this motherfucker right here. Touch it. Touch the fucking guitar. Boom! It was beautiful, and the fights would start. We had to do that in a way just to sort of, I mean, you know, you invite somebody into your house and, you know, they start breaking shit, you're like, no.
Violence was the trade-off for the club's proximity to the suburbs. Suburban kids don't actually have the street smarts that they think they have. Or I should say that if your street smarts is informed entirely by what you've read in a hardcore band's lyric sheet, you are coming into things with a very sort of idealized fantasy. That made the violence aspect of it actually much worse at City Gardens than it was at clubs in the city. And I think that's why eventually towards the end of the 80s, a lot of people with kind of jock mentalities started coming to shows, because those guys, I don't think they had the ability to decode the lyrics of what that music had been about for a long time. You know, themes like fear and depression and self-loathing and other kinds of transgressive attitudes. You know, that's why, you know, they just heard the rage that was locked up inside the sound of that music and then used it as a soundtrack to pummel people that they felt were different or just were smaller than them.
Tut basically said to Randy, stop booking bands that are going to bring skinheads out. And, you know, and I think Randy's reaction was, well, those shows bring kids in, and I make money from those shows. So I think the first way Randy sort of tried to bend Tut's rule was, well, we're just going to ban Doc Martens, which again I think is a great example of Randy's big heart, which was, yeah, Tut laid down this rule. But as a businessman, and also as somebody who's trying to do something for the kids in this area, let's see if we can find another solution without actually canceling these shows.
You as a singer, you had the voice. You had control of that whole, I control that whole crowd. At any given moment, if I told them to smash the place, they would. If I told them, you know, hey, quit the BS, this, you know, this is not what it's about, which is what I always did. It's about unity, it's about bringing together. They listen.
And I can remember at the Bad Brains show, them actually cooperating in the fact that it got out of hand wild, and HR and the band would say, we're going to do some reggae for a while, and actually calm people down.
We can groove.
Of course, the last song, all hell would break loose. You know, the last song of the show or the encore, I'm going to jump off the fucking stage. What are they going to do, throw me out? The show's over.
That last song, we'd be sitting there and basically spending more time
looking around, checking for bouncers, making sure we had a clear path to get up on the stage and dive.
They were trying to control it, but, you know, taking slam dancing out of a punk rock show would not make it a punk rock show. So, you know, I mean, being that it was punk, we're rebels anyway. So, like, who's going to read signs? Like, we're there to have fun.
Last night in New York, just a handful of thugs in the crowd. They didn't do much, but everybody else just stood there petrified. They didn't want to react or show emotion or anything. In other words, the people we all hated in school are back. Aside from that, I like dancing around. I like jumping off the stage. We don't mind it if you're cool about it, but are you getting anything out of it? I mean, sometimes I wonder whether so-called hardcore has become just another thrill ritual, like riding a roller coaster, skating a pipe, or a mental show, or Duran Duran, or whatever. I mean, I think dancing's cool as long as it isn't a mindless reaction, you know what I mean? Just come here, get your thrills, dive off the stage, go home, and learn nothing. That kind of thing makes us feel like we've totally fucking failed.
For insurance reasons, no stage diving, no slam dancing. You know, you had to have a disclaimer. In fact, I think, if I'm not mistaken, there were shows where you had to sign waivers and things like that. So if you got hurt, it was your business.
If you knew the backstage area, there was the stage, and then there was this little booth-looking thing that was the backstage that had this tiny little window. It was like maybe 3 feet high by 2 feet wide. And I remember starting our show, and the place was going crazy, and you see Dave Vision stand up in that little window and dive from the backstage into the crowd. See, that's what City Gardens is like. They were doing no stage diving, but then the most insane action would happen on that dance floor.
We had let the kids basically do whatever they wanted to do. We were the first venue in the area doing punk rock, you know, with Dead Kennedys and Black Flag. If kids wanted to jump up and jump off the stage, we let them. If they wanted to hang from the girder, we let them. We let them do whatever they wanted. But then all of a sudden, we'd come to the mailbox, we'd have a little yellow slip that says, "You have a certified letter."
I've been in the pit. Like, I was a feisty little girl. You know, I still have my first pair of Docs, and they're all scuffed up, and I would be out there, and I've got, like, ripped up band shirts and stuff. I took a couple to the chin quite a few times, you know, and then he'd yell at me, like, "Yeah, you're going to get me sued. Your grandparents are going to sue me."
You're being sued. This person who went to your show broke his arm.
They didn't care if Randy was throwing people out or not. There were people doing flips, like backflips off. I mean, it was just awesome.
And then it would happen again, and it was getting a little more frequent, They
probably got as hurt as they always did, but they didn't react the way that they did before that. You know, they were actually trying to make, you know, a payday out of it, which was really, really fucked up. It's like, you know, you want this club to stay open, you want to go see these bands. Like, there's very few people booking these bands.
I had to buy the policies, you know, $1,000. So then, once again, you're talking about, did we make money? You know, 1,000 people at a show for $10 or $12, you know, 10% of that just went for an insurance policy.
There were times when Randy would just say, "I can't," no. He would say no, and he'd look all sheepish and sort of sad about it. And he'd say, "You know, Tut basically said we can't." And so that sort of was my understanding of how things work, that Randy had a certain threshold that he was allowed to go up to as long as money was being made. But if there was being pressure put on the club, if the cops were snooping around, Tut was like, "I don't want any part of this, Randy, so find another way to make this happen. Don't book those bands anymore."
I'd get on the stage in front of 600 kids and say, "We can't do it anymore. You're suing us. I'm not suing you. You are suing me."
The whole vibe of the place changed, and the big thing for me was they didn't seem to have an appreciation for how much work it took to put these shows on. How much work, you know, by Randy, by the bands, by the people who worked at City Gardens, that they just took everything for granted.
I also remember going to buying tickets and Randy being completely pissed off because Johnny Rotten never showed up for a PIL show that sold out. Just never came. And he was pissed.
The bands were wanting more and more. We had a cramp show, and you know, they wanted like $6,000 instead of $3,000, and you know, tour buses and tractor trailers and breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Just seeing Randy and Tut, the toll that it was taking on them. You could just see them getting more and more, you know, that it was just grinding them down. They were getting burned out, that it was just harder and harder. They could never catch a break.
I remember back then, it was really easy to throw shitballs at a band and say like, oh, this band sucks because they're charging $9, you know? And Fugazi would come around and charge $4, you know? And we'd go like, oh, this band is a ripoff and a sellout. And Randy would go like, hey, you know, it's not my fault. The band wants this much money. And then in the end, ultimately, Tut ended up looking like the bad guy or the man or whatever because he was the man, you know?
Fun is not having lawsuits. Fun is not taking your life in your hands.
You know, it's just when it stops being fun, it's time to like hang it up.
I'm tired of this. And that's when I pretty much said, I think we're going to wrap this up.
When Randy left there, I believe Tut was still trying to keep it going and booking like local bands, and I did see my friend's local band there, and there was, you know, it was crickets. There was like 30, 40 people in a club that holds 900 plus. Whoever was booking the shows at that time didn't have the knowledge to bring bands in there. It was all Randy. Randy brought all of those bands there.
People give him a lot of credit and a lot of adulation for great shows. Oh, he put on this ska show or that hardcore show or this, you know, 9 Inch Nails show or whatever. And he gets a lot of credit for individual shows, and he's the guy who brought this huge band to Trenton, New Jersey. But I don't think that he really gets enough credit for building the foundation of what was to come and what could be built on top of that.
But right now, from Highland Park, New Jersey, the Ripley's.
All this hard work that he put in at this club that he loved has resulted in having absolutely nothing but memories. There's no retirement money there. There's no way to really support himself, and he's still working like a dog. And I think that's for me the sadness of the whole, honestly, the whole story.
What do these all sort of mean to you, this whole collection?
What does it mean to me? You know, now at 54 and the way the economy is and how I'm really not making any money, you know. I wish I never bought all these things. I wish I had the money instead, or I invested it. I have no retirement, you know. It's all gone.
I mean, because in the end, City Gardens was a mom and pop organization. You know, it was owned by, the building was owned by one guy. The shows were booked by one guy.
You know, he loves music, even though it's kicked him on his ass.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
When you think of legendary venues, CBGB's, the Troubadour in California, even the Cavern Club in Liverpool, City Gardens isn't like that. You can wear a CBGB's t-shirt and you know what that means. Anybody can wear one, you know immediately what that means. There is no City Gardens t-shirt. There's no kind of mental picture of what City Gardens was. City Gardens was the people, the bands, and it was Randy now.
It wasn't a hardcore club, it wasn't a punk club, it wasn't a ska club. I mean, different bands, different nights. You could see the Bad Brains one night, Killing Joke the next night, a ska band the next night. I loved it for that.
You know, he had a vision for what he wanted to do, and he made it happen. And, you know, at the time, as a local band, you may have your grumbles and gripes with Randy, but in retrospect, it was pretty selfless what he was doing, you know.
The will to live life on your terms is that lifelong lesson we get from this music.
Some might look at it like, oh, he's flogging the dead horse, but I don't look at it that way at all. I look at every night as a new chance to get out there and have fun, and it's kind of the cavalcade of old hits, you know. It's like I'd be playing Tooling for Enos in the Holiday Inn in Secaucus when I'm 80 years old, you know.
What motivates a person and what drives a person to keep doing and getting better at what they do, or try to, you know, over a course of a long time, that's something you kind of, you know, in other words, if touring and all that stuff goes with the territory, it just does, you know. Everybody has to go and work and to keep the machine alive, so to speak, you know, and connect with an audience. And, you know, now live is, it's funny because, you know, there's so much access now to anything, but yet live is probably the most important part of a band's life.
For every venue that is jammed up right now with bands trying to get on these stages, there's some empty Elks Lodge, some empty Knights of Columbus Hall, there's some empty basement somewhere waiting for something to happen.
No, it never occurred to me that he would ever be booking shows for venues that only hold 50 people. But it always occurred to me that sooner or later someone's going to want to make a movie about him. Where's the logic in that?
I mean, to be quite honest, and it might be a little naive of me, I just never thought City Gardens would close. I mean, I was so in the moment with that place up until the day that somebody told me it closed. I just assumed that I'd be in my 40s and Randy would still be booking shows there.
We have a place in New Hope called John and Peter's. And the best part of John and Peter's is the pictures on the wall. It's not what they're doing now. What they're doing now is nothing, absolutely nothing. They're living off of some old laurel somewhere, and it's not good. But you look at the wall and you go, Chris Christopherson was here? You know, when is he coming back? He ain't coming back. None of those people, they're all either dead or they're not coming back to that room. City Gardens is not living off of the pictures on the wall, which is great.
One day, I really would like to walk through there again. I don't know what would be required, but I'd like to turn the lights on and just kind of stand around and just kind of eyeball it one last time.
Guy loves rock and roll.
Okay, everybody, let's go. We gotta say goodnight.
Devotion you let go astray, a debt that you can never pay. If things don't change, how can you stay? Just watch it go to waste. A dream that's immaterial, not fire above the can't know what's in my head. There is no hiding place where you can't view my fall from grace. Show it twice, I'll take too late. Put my misfortune on display. Following obscurity, strangled possibilities. I've lost all my patience and I'm not part of this equation. Like a riot on a dance floor, leaves me searching for more. Surrender what you overcame. Try and salvage what remains. The wall of silence grows, then it falls like dominoes. Once passionate and violent, it doesn't